It is 7:10. Start the meeting. We chose to have a special meeting so we could focus exclusively on the content in terms of equity and diversity. Chief in particular and I, and to some extent, Deputy have been working in the ground to further explore and understand issues. A lot of this, Alex is going to summarize for us. I've already met with one of the recruits that we just hired and Saturday and talk about their experience and and all of this is not only in the general context that we need to have a exam, probably a testing pattern, probably in March.
Yep, March 22.
Oh, okay. Officially, I'm calling the meeting to order. Officially. And yeah, pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you. And a moment of silence, please, for State Trooper that we lost the storm. Thank you.
But Joe, I want you to know that I said it like you said, pledge allegiance to the flag, plural.
And that actually wasn't in our, I didn't get you, but thank you. Today's meant to be a robust discussion. To that end, I'm going to ask Alex to take the lead, then the drafts person, because he got asked to do that via the town government, overall townwide effort. To a large extent, our discussion will revolve around recruitment, oral interviews, financial hardships, the physical of CPAT, and the requirement of a team. And I do want it to be a discussion that Alex sent out today. The chief sent a lot of material to us. Very helpful. We're not going to go through it unless there are specific questions. Its point is that there is no typical evidence testing process in any way inhibits our ability to hire women. So it's not about the testing. It's about the recruitment and the other things are getting hired. Focus to create department. And I would say, while this is all focused on a test, we also then need to start to focus on keeping people once we hire them and making them comfortable. First experience with Caitlin is don't have the everyday uniform to fit women. They had to substitute something. Fortunately, our uniform person worked with them, came up with, I think, something that's quite accessible, but it's one of the little things that we need to think about in the law. With that, if there are any questions right now, but otherwise I'll turn it over to Alex to walk us through.
Thank you, Madam.
Take the lead.
All right, so as our chair has informed us here, so we did decide to take a look at hiring practices based on town-wide racial equity and justice task force mission, explore any town where we can identify the elements of structural racism or bias in that sense of preventing folks potentially hired or discriminated against their fashion document, whether that's regulation, ordinances, or anything else, or policy that they provide. And so we took a comprehensive look at the hiring process here in town. Chief spent an inordinate amount of time with us kind of going over the hiring process. He also went through all of the previous historical records in terms of folks hired, with all of the statistics. As Dorothea mentioned, there was an original assumption kind of going in that hey, maybe there's an issue with testing, whether it be oral, written, or physical, and then somehow that was, there were structural barriers preventing minorities from being hired, whether it be women or members of other minority groups that are underrepresented or not represented in the department. And through subsequent discoveries, as Dorothy mentioned, that's 100% correct. What we realized here is that it is not a matter of the testing itself. So when we get into it, if you don't mind, guys, I'll just kind of go through the background and then the recommendation, if that's okay with everyone. Okay. So in terms of what we looked at, right, there have been 2 women that have been hired and subsequently retired from the department. We've had one who's just been hired, as mentioned, waiting to go to the fire at the gal, and then once she does, she'll be out of the job. We don't have members of any other minority group that have self-identified as members of those groups. We do have 2 uniform members of the department that self-identify as biracial. And those are things that we are seeking to address. And so what we did is we took a look at the CPAT exam, which is a physical exam that's required in order for you to attend the academy. It is not a mandate nationally, but it is the most commonly used exam. And in the course of the discovery, it has gone through 5 federal lawsuits, Department of Justice review for a host of reasons. In all cases, it's passed because it's been bare minimum what's required for physical requirements for the job. And therefore, it's stood up to strict scrutiny. And so we started to look at the passing rates. There are a lower rate for women for passing based on some of the physical requirements, and then also for minority candidates. And we started to realize as we went through this, a lot of it has to do with preparation and being given need to get on a level playing field with other candidates' teams. And so we'll discuss that as well. So I actually went through and ran the CPAT myself. It was extremely difficult. It's not an easy test by any means. The chief came up and provided adult supervision. I passed by the skin of my teeth, which was lucky, but I think they gave me a feel for just how difficult this is. And for what our candidates have to go through. So they said about 10 to 20% of candidates pass right off the street. It's not typically normal. Women have a passing rate of about 40% ultimately, and on average 70% of men will pass, so we just random raw statistics. There are, what I've been able to gather, women have to take the exam more time than men do to pass, and that is just based on statistics. No. But what we found again is that preparation seems to be the issue for a lot of folks. And one of the candidates at one point, this is an anecdote, this is not an average, they ended up spending almost $3,000 between weighted vests and prep for exams and everything else that went on. So not the normal situation, but those are one of the extreme cases that we're working with. So as the chief mentioned, and again, statistics show, he has made a conscious effort over the last few years with the department to expand the recruiting base to move to a regional list, as many of you are familiar with, testing purposes for recruiting. And that has yielded a larger candidate pool of minority candidates from which to hire. Because as you guys know, going through this, more people end up getting weeded out and start the process for written, oral, or physical. And if the candidate pool isn't large enough, you're not going to end up with enough folks who make it through that process in order to hire someone, and therefore we end up in a situation where we're down. So then when it comes to recruiting, that seems to be the issue there, to make sure we get more folks on the list. We also determined, and again through some research and conversation with folks who are conducting this, that for oral exams, candidates who have family members of a fireman or are also very close friends with firemen, and sort of part of the firefighting family, so to speak, have a leg up, so to speak, in preparation for those oral exams, because they kind of what to expect. The questions aren't given them ahead of time, but in general, they're prepped for the type of oral interview questions they might get from a firefighter's perspective. So if you can imagine, since there's not a lot of women or minorities who are hired in the career field right now, I mean, there's not a lot who are also members of their families or friends and circles that they can look out to, and so they face a slight disadvantage there for that reason. And then when it comes to financial barriers, right? Get hired anywhere, right? Normally people submit a job application, you go and you get hired in the civilian world, but for this career field, for this job, there are financial requirements for testing, for applying to different departments, for physically getting yourself to places if you have to go take the exam for testing. So somebody with lesser means may not be able to get back and forth with merit in the middle of the workday. And so there's some things there that are barriers to employment for folks who have lesser means. Okay. So we take a look at it all together. There's financial barriers for employment. The oral exams, there's an opportunity for folks who have relationships to get a little bit of a leg up. Recruiting, expanding the base seems to have done the trick to date, and we'll discuss in a moment. And then again, we took a look at the physical exam and realized the preparation probably the one area we can work on to help candidates once they've met certain standards in terms of passing our exams and get on the list to help prepare them for that CPAT exam. And so for the recommendations, kind of at a high level to give everybody an idea, so we did speak to fire chiefs from Bridgeport, New Haven, Hartford, Yonkers, and New Rochelle, so between basically New Haven, Fairfield, and Westchester counties, our neighbors, try to talk to some of the big career chiefs. I've had all of our chiefs here in the department, chief and the deputy chief. And so the IAFF has made some recommendations for where we should be focusing on recruitment, which the chief has been actively working on since he got here, and expanded the efforts we've had. We would like to see that continue. And so that's in, for the IFF, minority neighborhoods, churches, and other gathering places, gyms and health clubs with predominantly minority or female memberships, social service organizations, businesses frequented by minorities, athletic clubs, teams and events, military personnel, either active or recently discharged. And so recommendations for possibilities, right? Once they get on the list, to provide access to the Parks and Rec gym to allow people self and shape to go take the CPAT exam. Potentially have Fairfield look at becoming a certified CPAT training facility here explored. It's not something you can just kind of do. There is a certification process that's required, something at least to explore, even if we decide not to do it. And then also hosting a series of firefighter career orientation partnership with other regional fire departments. And will serve as a clear roadmap for those who are unfamiliar with the application and testing process, who may not have a family member or someone to rely on to help them guide through the process, right? And then Fairfield hosting, so kind of how to prepare for the oral interview program or series. And so that gives folks who don't currently have that relationship with somebody in the fire service an opportunity to meet with career firefighters and chief officers, and kind of get a feel for what's going to come to help prepare them better and put them on a level playing field with everyone else. And then Fairfield joining and participating with other regional departments in the greater Fort metropolitan area to recruit applicants. So kind of a regionalized recruiting effort so we can maximize resources that are available to us with neighboring departments, people in the area. Because as we've noticed, as the chief has made clear, and some of the other departments have seen, there are folks from all over Connecticut who are trying to get hired, and there are people who get hired up in the northeast corner. They come down this way in general to a job site, and then as soon as they can transfer the department closer to home, that's what they do. And so that's costing time and money for everyone. It'd be nice if we could try to focus locally, but as well as to expand the base of folks who happen to live in the area. Also talked about a series of CPAT test prep exams to help candidates identify and tailor conditioning for successful completion of the exam. They'll be referred to external and fire academy prep and conditioning programs to give them an opportunity to test and train at an official training session to do so. And then finally, another one of the barriers here is talking about the EMT prerequisites, so investigating alternatives for that for hiring. So this requirement, it could have an impact on minorities and those without access to volunteer opportunities or ambulance corps. If you don't work for a volunteer organization and you have to take that out of pocket, it's very costly to get that done. So that's another opportunity there. And then finally, we're going to look to expand recruiting into urban areas and venues to achieve diversity goals. And again, altogether, the recommendations kind of look at how do we better prepare candidates who may be of lesser means or less access to the firefighters at career field for written, for oral exams, for the actual CPAT exam itself, to prepare them for CPAT, and then also transportation back and forth to their lesser means, get back and forth to the testing facility. We have a bunch of candidates who are looking to do that at one time. And then obviously expanding and our outreach and recruitment, and then partnering with our regional departments, as much as we've done for testing and everything else. Where we were, we're in a much better position than where we were from what I can tell 5 or 6 years ago. Got hired and he's taken some initiatives on his belt he's led without being asked to improve this and ensure we get a bigger candidate pool to increase our opportunities for hire, which resulted in now the third woman in the department's history getting hired. She was just sworn in and is going to go to the fire academy. But with everything else, there's room for. So, by and large, that's kind of an overall summary of what we found and recommendations that we'd like to make to the town, both to the first selectman's office, the HR director, and the regional and equity office staff.
Or we open up the
Just to the overarching philosophy, deserve even is you would be a better fire department. The question is why? Why do all this? And I come from a history where you post a test, 1,000 young white men say, I want to do that, and I've been working for it since I was 16, and they come take the test and take the cream of that process. And it's easy, it's quick, it's brainless, and it's accessible. But you end up with fire department that, like Karen and I, with hair. When I look at the mirror, I see hair, but I'm the only thing. But we would be a better department if we had cultural, gender, and ethnic diversity. You think of who comes to work in town, who travels through town, and you adhere to them and our sensitivity to them for their comfort. You know, and we've talked about, you know, nobody calls us and says, thanks, your guys were really strong. Your guys were really smart. Your guys were, very brave. They call and they say, your guys were compassionate in our worst moment. And it's their worst moment that we see, folks in town. And how important it would be to them, how important it would be for us to be able to do our job better if we had someone that could speak the language that's being spoken, that looks like our customers and the public that we serve, that we could be better at that compassionate part with that cultural sensitivity, that a female firefighter brings a different perspective to the job than maybe the deputy and I and people that look and act like us. I think that there are 1,000 justifications for why this is worth the effort. As the commissioner pointed out, it's a difficult, and I've been working on it certainly during my time in Norwalk and now here, when history has been, this is a young white man's game exclusively. It is not even on the radar for women because they have never considered it to be an opportunity, and they don't want to be the first or the only. It's not considered an opportunity because for an African American or Hispanic young man or woman, because they have no family history. There's nobody that's mentoring them. Hey, this would be a good career. This, you're good with your hand. You're good with mechanics. You would thrive in this environment. And that's what I had. I think that's what the deputy had, and that's what a lot of firefighters that we work with have. It was somebody in the family. I mean, you could talk to Harry Ackley or Boone Gardner or Joe Raines. I grew up in the firehouse. That's how they speak of their experience. I rode my bike to the firehouse in Fairfield, and I hung around and watched rigs during that. There is just a natural exposure over our formative years that it becomes, this is a public safety first responder, police, fire, teacher, or nurse, is, the pathway that, my siblings and I gravitated towards. We don't have that. So creating that from scratch for women and minorities is a huge undertaking because I can solve that. I can solve the math part of it. I can solve the process part of it. We can, make sure that we have a text that takes out adverse impact. We can, have a program that better prepares, as Commissioner pointed out, better prepares you for the interview process, better prepares you for the physical part. We can do that. That's the easy part. It's convincing somebody to take the first step that leads them to those testing opportunities. That's really hard because now it's changing culture. And that's a Herculean task. And one of the issues that the chairwoman and I spoke about, and that's something time with Alex, is when we are recruiting, testing, preparing, to get those people, to fill out an application. Anything that I do or the town of Fairfield spends money on to prepare candidate A to be successful in the testing process. There's no guarantee that we get that. And it's whether we're running our own test or running somebody else, or the consortium test. The investment we make in that one individual, of those individuals, we run a CPAT test down here. It costs $40,000 to buy the equipment. We would have to have trainers here. They would have to run, we'd have to pay them overtime. You know, that would be, you know, the cost for participation would be hundreds of dollars, either that we absorb or they absorb. Where do they end up? They end up going to fire departments across the state of Connecticut. They are not applying just for us. And even if we ran our own test, well, we tell everybody, you want a job in the fire department? Go take every test in the state of Connecticut. Every test you possibly get, because the chance of you winning the jackpot, of coming high enough out on the list for the 3 or 4 or 5 people we're going to hire over the next 2 years is incredibly slim. So, and that's the reason why we went to the consortium. We want to give those people an opportunity to 75 jobs, as opposed to a half a dozen or less in the town of Fairfield. So I absolutely am committed. My peers are committed to, you know, the reason why we went to divert the statewide testing is purely for the diversity issue. Because we knew that we couldn't recruit. I can't recruit in Fairfield for diversity. There was any candidates? Oh, yeah, one candidate out of 600 came from the town of Fairfield. One. Unfortunately, she came out high enough that we hired her. So we are not getting candidates from Fairfield. We're getting them from other suburban communities. And a testament to our education system, you know, we have educated them, and they have sought, you know, to go to college and have other careers in public safety. But, you know, we have to, the reason why we did, you know, started the consortium is so that we can recruit across community lines, particularly in the urban communities, so that we are greater diversity. So it is a work in progress. Unfortunately, you know, we talked about, you know, regional recruitment with Bridgeport. Bridgeport said, you know what, we're going to do it on our own. We are so committed to making sure that we're only providing job opportunities for Bridgeport residents in the city of Bridgeport. We don't want to do that with any other suburban community. And it's a hard no. What it is, there's no, you know, they're a staunch civil service organization, and they have a mandate, as does Hartford, as does New Haven. We're only hiring essentially exclusively, or as much as they can, from the city and city residents. So you know, they don't want to participate. Doesn't mean the end of the effort. I've reached out to Alex Vishno, and we had a great meeting with him, our test consultant, and the co-chair from the consortium, and he's going to produce a video, and the video will include diversity and ethnic and racial and gender diversity as part of the video. And Alex does such a great job in all of his videos that, you know, it is you know, it's something you want to watch a second time and the third time. So we're going to market that, and we're going to work on that. We're going to work on getting into guidance counselors. You know, how is the Army successful? Army is successful because they are going after guidance counselors in high school, you know, grooming the next generation of candidates for military service. You know, and I think that that's one we can make an impact. You know, there is a place and a career for everybody, and not everybody's going to college. Want to, you know, start with when they are making those decisions. What am I going to do with my life? That this becomes an option. So recruitment, you know, in all aspects, doing it statewide, sharing the cost of the video is going to be $5-6 grand. We have a mechanism to, you know, share that cost amongst the consortium members. You know, how do we address the lack of familiarity with the process. And having some open houses, not just in here, but because the candidates are coming from all over the state, using the regional fire schools all over the state to do some of those orientations that, here is a great career. We don't want you to be so overwhelmed when you walk into a room to participate in an oral interview that you're making stupid mistakes. And I think that, part of the feedback that we got is some people are completely ill-prepared or unprepared for the environment of at 19, 20, 21 years old or older, to present themselves in the most positive way to beat out the other 20 candidates that are being interviewed. So how do we, we want to provide some of that orientation. And lastly, the physical prep. CPAT is a grind, even for a young man like the one next to me. We want candidates to do well. We want them to pass. The purpose of this whole process is not to weed people out, it's to find people who can be successful. Giving them the exposure to equipment, how it operates, some of the techniques. A candidate, and I think that, one of the, Alex talked about, the struggle of multiple testing and all of that. It came down to a simple technique is getting the dummy's butt up off the ground to move quicker. And that's just a technique. If you're dragging this on the ground, you're going much slower than if you can get the butt of that dummy over there off the ground and move it, you can move a lot quicker. And it was one of those simple, hey, this might be a better way to attack it that helped that candidate, finally, come in under the sun. So we want to make sure that, we are doing our best to give people those kinds of tools so they can use them. We ran the consortium test in 2018. Well, we ran it in 2016. There was no women and no minorities. That was a fearful test. We ran the consortium test. We've done a little bit better. We've done a little bit better in 2020. Our goal is to continue that path. We have and have had a great relationship with the test consultant that there is good distribution of women and minorities throughout that entire list. So you have a normal bell curve of the white candidates, and you have a normal bell curve of women and minorities. Offset a little bit. So when you look at, the highest candidates over here, there is a marginal, and I don't know the technical term for that, but it's within acceptable limits. So candidates of color and females are at near the top of the list. They're spread out across the list, just as white candidates are spread across the list. So there's ample opportunity for them to get a job. And there's another woman on our, should be number one, next Tuesdays. So we anticipate that we'll be hiring in January, probably 2 candidates for the academy. So we may have the second female candidate if she doesn't get hired between now and then. And there have been minorities that presented in the process. And they may be ones that should have or could have done much better with a little bit of orientation. So I think that we are committed to some of these solutions for the town. We're one of the only departments, where actually they're this way. Out of all the departments, fire department has the least representation. You have historical reasons for that. At the end of the day, those reasons don't mean anything if we are so poorly, we're not achieving something all the time. So,
both the commissioner and the deputy chief were on the interview panel, so I would go to you, I guess, and then deputy, just in terms of. Because Joe and I have spent 8.
Yeah,
I get those 8 days back.
Great learning experience.
it was obvious, hey, for the people who prepared and the ones that did not prepare. Now, whether it was through grooming, spoke about, or whether it was somebody who said, this is what I want to do, and investigated it on their own to figure out how to do it. But it was quite obvious that some people were, and I understand, because some people get nervous. You put somebody in the front of a room like this, they're gonna clam up. But if this was a coffee table, they'd be fine. I do understand that part of it. What the solutions are, I'm not quite sure, but I think that's why we're here. My big concern is I don't think we want to lower our standards. We want to keep our standards where they are. And I'm a little concerned with the financial cost, as you brought up, the chief brought up, is we're putting money out there to help with the recruitment that the town's paying for, and there's no guarantee we're gonna get this person. And that really concerns me. That, trying to be a little fiscal conservative here, I understand that we need to do something, but I just don't want to be, paying for things and not really see a benefit for it. The cost benefit isn't going to be there for us. So that's my main concern.
Yeah, I think talking to the chief about certain doing one thing that fire was we're in class testing costs there. Same concern about recruiting that we're all kind of putting in the same pot. Because the same concern, yes, we should be spending our dollars for the other departments. So that made total sense, and that was one of the concerns for the structure of what that would look like going forward. That if it was going to be a regionalized approach, it would have to be because the greater Bridgeport regional area, and then Bridgeport's pushing back, it sounds like a little bit, but if we work with the other towns on the cost, and it's to get folks to try to think. I hear you on that one, that makes sense.
Well, and that's why we're talking about using somebody to CPAC, using all the regional fire schools.
Right.
Well, geographically distributing it, but hopefully dealing with
Right. But again, the issue that I see is we can set up all these great programs. The problem is getting the word out that these programs are there for.
Exactly.
And that's the bigger issue.
Mhm.
And I don't know if we're gonna solve that in this room. We can work towards it, but, again, we can, do CPAT practice here, and we can do oral interviews and practice interviews. But if we can't get the people to come, then it's, we're spinning our wheels.
Yeah, I just want to comment about, the prep and how a little bit of help can go a long way. I think when I think of candidate, I want to get a candidate that's here, up to here. I don't think that our goal is ever to get a candidate from here. That's not our job. And Alex, one of the first conversations that we had on this subject is about CPAC. And is it fair that a candidate has to spend $3,000 to condition to test and pass CPAC? Well, as I describe it, is the physical conditioning of that candidate was down here and took all that effort to come up to here. And good for the candidate. But that is not a response, that is not a failure, in my opinion, of the test. It's a rigorous test.
Right.
It's supposed to be a rigorous test. It's not even indicative of the real, strain and stress of going to the fire academy, but it's a baseline. So I don't think that it's our responsibility to get candidates conditioned from here to get up here to pass CPAC. It's to give those people, open the door so they can do that on their own and, you know, guarantee that people are here, or when that candidate comes up to here, we can help them get up to a passing score.
Yeah, but I would
That's how
also,
I look at it.
but I would also argue, it is our job to coach everybody, sort of strategies of pick up the buck. You know, those kinds of things are things that we can share universally. And so the candidate all the way down here may come up then to where we, I'll go to the deputy and then.
One thing that I find exciting is the low hanging fruit of going and spreading the food. That doesn't really cost that much. You get people in the community or firefighters say, you know, hey, stop today. Why don't you stop off at Moore, stop off at Ludlow and speak to maybe, you know, the people there and maybe the women's groups there. In Yonkers, we spoke in churches, party churches and that, so. You mentioned gyms, and that's where you're gonna get men and women, you know, all groups, you know, if you go to a gym, maybe in Norwalk, you get someone,
Cross section.
a cross section. You know, the whole idea is to get more and more people of different groups at that starting. Then the second part, which is be a little hard, is to, you know, try to, you know, bring people who don't have, maybe give them, that or that takes a little more. That's something where we're gonna have to maybe do some out of this school, maybe work with the ambulance company. They need personnel and person who works for them, they may get a job as, they may be able to get a job that'll sustain them until they get on a fire department. And then they're great for us because they've got EMT skills, the hands-on skills we need.
Well, and there are structural barriers solved because if you're under 18, you can't just right along with you. I know because I have friends in high school, getting the ride-alongs and getting the sort of along with that was one of the obstacles. Now they're doing virtual ride-alongs thanks to COVID. So in some ways, that now has provided a model that we can act.
That's right. And I think we're actually too back in, we're actually right. So
Yeah.
the video and stuff, proving we're not spending a lot of money.
Yeah.
Because you're right, you do all the programs in the world, if you don't advertise, nobody's showing up. And I think the main point was like, people saying, the level playing field. Yeah, so like, okay, so prepare for oral exam. Guys, you're going to be asked serious questions along these lines, you know. Stand up straight, be confident, give an answer that's your own opinion. And if they screw it up when they get in there, no matter who it is, right? Like you said at that point, they didn't take the initiative, but at least if the guidance is given a kind of level playing field, that's all this is. The standards don't get lowered. There's a standard that's required to make sure our people are safe that doesn't get lowered. There's a written exam standard that's set nationally that doesn't get lowered. There's an oral interview standard that will get lowered. It's more if there's a little bit of prep that we can do to get candidates prepared for those three. They still have to meet and pass all three of those at the existing standard. That doesn't go away. There's a couple of folks that we know that are going through the process, and we talk to other departments where there are candidates who simply didn't have the same opportunity. So it's about trying to level the playing field. They fail after that. I mean, there's nothing you can do. Like you said, the standards have to remain where they are for safety reasons for our folks that fall down the field.
But part of what we have to know is the vast majority of people we talk to have some reference in their contact to the fire department. Uncle, father, cousin, and that makes it hard because other people don't have the frame of reference. But, you know, you can also target your marketing. We ought to be looking at McKinley, targeting McKinley's parents and kids because that is a diverse community. And it is a real community, unlike some of the others. So, but the three that haven't had a chance to talk, commissioners, questions, thoughts?
Is the police department more diverse?
Yes.
Why?
It's a different model. I think that, you know, there is their hiring process is different. Go out and actively, lately, you know, incumbents, certified police officers, other departments. And I think that there is a greater interest in law enforcement, particularly about women in for fire department. They have a higher number of applicants. And, you know, there is a more, become a firefighter, there are fewer opportunities for diversification in your career. You're gonna be a firefighter. Yeah, there's a lot of different things that firefighters do, but everybody's a firefighter. And in the police department, there are a number of different divisions that allow for community service-minded folks, for the detective bureau, school resource officers, where you could spend your career doing 3, 4, 5 different, very different jobs and still be called a police officer. That doesn't, you know, and you can be in the fire department, you could be hazmat, you could be marine, you could be EMT, the marine division, EMT, diver. But every day you're a firefighter. You're not doing those things exclusively, whereas the police department, you're nearly exclusively. Community resource, nearly exclusively. Detective, you're nearly exclusively. Community resource officer. So I think it's a different, I think folks look at police officer jobs differently than, and that's more attractive and has proven to be more. It's not just in Fairfield. I think across the state area, our police department are better at diversification.
But the other thing, Bill, going back to the days when you and I were in this, so a long time ago, there was a change in the recruitment strategy focused on churches in Bridgeport, reaching out through very specific kinds of into a more diverse base of applicants. So many of the people you see in sort of sergeant and lieutenant positions now came in during that effort. I don't know what they do now, but I go to the council of churches and with Bridgeport small churches overcome that. So that argues to what we're talking about is we have to expand and be more targeted.
I think if we do nothing else, I mean, doesn't matter what else we do, we don't do that, we're not gonna do it.
Or not, me, right, 100%.
You know, we talked about EMT and whether that's the barrier. We looked at the top 116 positions, the 2 lists, the EMT list, non-EMT list. Fairfield needs the EMT list. There are departments that use the non-EMT list. They train them when they get on the job, or the fire department doesn't provide EMT level service, so they don't certify. In the top 116 was just that number, it's the number on the front page. There were 31 women and minorities, and on the EMT list, there were 26. Not that big of a difference, which I was shocked. I thought it would be much, much different, but it proved not. So I'm not sure that, you know, some of those structural elements are, you know, where we need to spend a lot of money because, you know, the marginal gain.
Really, forever. I think the biggest thing is like, even if you prepare folks to get through this, there's only a 70% chance that a man's going to pass eventually, only a chance of a woman to pass, regardless of what other groups they happen to identify with. So if you don't have a big enough pool of whoever they happen to be, whatever category we're going to target for recruitment, like you said, don't get the word out, and there's not enough people, then they can weed out through the process, and then there's nobody to hire. So, I mean, this all boils down to, at the end of it, if nothing else, the chief mentions, we got to expand the recruiting big. None of the rest of this stuff, I mentioned, that's got to be covered.
I think, if one of the problems that we have is a lot of towns in the cities are all going after the same people. We all need to increase our minority.
Yeah.
Now, like, so that our biggest area that we could draw from would be the city of Bridgeport. Well, So they're out there recruiting like you wouldn't believe. And one of the things they do for a city resident, they actually give them 15 points on the test. If you're a city resident and a non-resident. So that's what we're up against. And, you know, I don't want to say it's easier to get out in Bridgeport, but there's more people going that way than coming this way.
If you were a firefighter, where would you rather be a firefighter there?
Well, if you're a young firefighter, you want to be in the city.
That's true.
If you're an older firefighter, you want to go back into the town.
So it depends, and I don't know the comparison. But one of the feedback that we get as we talk to people is the diversity of functions that the chief was talking about that we have.
Sure.
That has been, makes Fairfield an attractive
Well,
place.
see, so many, I mean, like, I don't know anything, right, but if it was up to me, it sounds like Fairfield would be a much easier job than Bridgeport.
Well,
I don't firefighter, like Fairfield, we have a smoke detector, we have 2-hour ratings, we don't have 3 families all over the city, like the amount of fires in Bridgeport compared to the amount of fires in Fairfield. I'd rather be in Fairfield, it's an easier job, right?
I wouldn't say easier.
It's not easier.
I find that this department is so progressive. We're always training, always. I mean, every day there's on-duty units coming down here. It's not like we're sending them on overtime. Oh, yeah, we're getting money, we're coming down here. No, these are everyday units. We can have almost the whole fire department sitting there. Well, you know, half the fire department in the morning and the other half in the, they're always training. They're taking-
Yeah, fine, I understand that, I'm saying like actual fire, right, like safety fire.
But you know what? They're getting extrications all the time on the parkway. They're doing EMS, which a lot of other departments, Bridgeport, they're not all EMTs. We are. We're going out. We're doing a lot of medical calls.
Look, we're very, the only point I'm trying to make is the population difference between Fairfield and Bridgeport is what, 47 to 200, the biggest city in the state, okay? That seems like a much harder job than
Different, but they also have more people on a fire engine. Have less of our people.
Well, the things that, and again, we gotta get the word out there, is, you know, the city of Bridgeport seeing this now with their police department. There are people jumping ship left there, so Bridgeport trained them, but they're not supporting them, they're not paying them. You know, they don't have a decent benefit package. So part of the thing that we do need to get out there is, yes, we are a very progressive department. You will not sit still if you're in this department. You think you're gonna come to work and fall asleep in a chair. That's not fair.
Right.
But this is a place for a career where you're gonna make money. You're gonna be taken care of, unlike someplace where it's just a job. And when it's just a job, and I see it in the private sector, that's when people start jumping ship.
Right.
So poach all those guys from Bridgeport.
Actually, our next person is
We got some, actually, I was in Bridgeport Fire Headquarters today, and I was up on the 3rd floor in the chief's office, and I got, no, you're taking one of our guys, eh? Right.
So, but like Waterbury's a town, it's a city, it's one of those places where a lot of people maybe might want to work because they'll see more fires, but one of our last firefighters came from there because it's just not, well, disparagingly, but we've heard that, you know, it's not the same feeling. You know, it's a very.
Not gonna be taken care of, Peter.
Right.
They don't pay well, they don't have benefits.
So that's what we need to get out there as well, as this is a career, a place for a career, not a job as a firefighter, but a career where you can support your family, where you don't have to worry about taking that second and third job. If we're gonna take care of it, you're gonna have a pension. Hope we're all gonna keep pension programs going to the fire department.
You're working with other good people. It's a great,
Exactly.
it's a great atmosphere. When I came up here, the quality of the people, the assistant chiefs, I would put against any New York City, you know, chiefs that sit at the table and they would not be, bottom of that.
One of the strong
Mine is less, it's easy.
one of the strong differentiators is if people feel like they're really part of a community, whatever it doesn't, that makes a difference to people. And so selling that this is a firefighter. part of it.
So solicit those cities firefighters.
Our department of recruitment effort, right? Like, like you said, in cities where you got some of the career departments where folks may want to come here, where
Let them know what we offer here. They obviously
Right.
don't know it. But they solicit strictly firefighters and name the city, Bridgeport, Norwalk.
The problem is, and the chief knows this, is even though they're there and we're here, we still work together. So we need to be real careful. We need to be careful.
We don't want them trying to pirate from us then.
Right.
Because It starts to become
It
fair
doesn't sound
play.
like they will though.
No.
If they did, I mean, look, you have to have your credit examined.
I only know one firefighter that left Fairfield to go to Bridgeport. And
He was dating someone there.
no, they came back and then went to Greenwich and then went all around.
So,
But, no, that's my,
Fairfield sounds like your attention very strong.
right. We do have.
We have only lost
Yeah,
one
retention.
firefighter, came here, great young man, really interested, excited. I think that, you know, is under your tenure, and his grandfather and great grandfather in Danbury. And because he came up through the, you know, volunteer ranks, maybe I need to go somewhere else other than Danbury, because they didn't look kindly on the volunteer. And he, like, I know Danbury like the back of my hand, what I'm doing in Fairfield, that he made.
Understood.
So that was the only time that we have lost anybody to another department. We have gotten people from other departments.
Yeah, David, I think the both of your points you were banking on, I think you're right. In terms of like the police officers, we're seeing a lot of folks who are leaving Fairfield from other departments, the chief mentioned. There are issues in other municipalities and some of their police departments, which I don't want to get into with anyone, but the benefits that are offered, their career of the atmosphere, like we talked about in terms of diversification, workforce, with the mission, everything they, and the fact that we do have solid, well-funded pensions, medical plans, everything else going into the future that we have in town, has been an attractive package for folks in other places where they don't feel like getting the support as a police officer. So I think, to both your points, and where, if these videos are getting out, we're doing recruitment and it's generalized and it's saying, hey, here's what our benefits package looks like. We've got solid pensions that are vested, this is like, and really put the words out. I think we may end up getting firemen from other places coming in and, if they come of their own volition, we end up doing a super targeted campaign in those particular departments. I think there's going to be repercussions for some of those chiefs, but if we're not out targeting them, but the information's getting out, like you're saying, in those places, they're seeing it.
Right.
But part of it argues for real clarity of taking the time to strategically think, what are our key messages?
Yep.
Well, and maybe segmented by, not yet in the system and messages that have more to firefighters in general who have some history, have some family history, that kind of thing.
Seems to be twofold too, based on what you were saying. So if I heard you both correctly, I think it right. There's a need for diversified outreach to folks to get them interested in fire service. People have no exposure to it, or have no idea what a great career this is. And so that's kind of like, it feels like here's the benefit for everything else. And then there's also, you may be interested, you have no idea what you're doing. Let us explain the process to you, and here's what's available. Gotta do it.
and I think through, marketing is what we have to do. We have to market it. But we're talking about a video done by the consortium, which really isn't tailored to Fairfield. But if we can do another small one for some sort of marketing for us, and say, if you are interested, come speak to our public information officer or recruitment officer or whatever. And come speak to that person, and then let that person be the one that's, helping them along a little. Because if they show enough initiative, come and ask the question, then you can work with them.
Absolutely.
But if somebody doesn't show an initiative, then
It's never gonna work. You're 100% right.
Oh, what we have done is when we are working on the list, we go after the top candidates on the list. Give them a phone call, invite them into the office, try to make the case that you're on the consortium list. You're gonna be a candidate, 15 out of the town. you're at the top of our list, as you are on theirs. These are the right reasons why you need to consider coming to Fairfield. I think we've been pretty successful at that because people have said, no, I'm from Mansfield, Connecticut. I want to work in Fairfield. You know, they get treated with respect. No other fire chief is calling them up and saying, hey, why don't you come into, the Bristol Fire Headquarters and we'll have a chat. They get a call from us. They're coming in, and I think it makes an impression to your point. You're part of a family. You're going to be taken care of here. You're going to be treated with respect here. And I think that's the environment that we're trying to demonstrate to them so that when they get a call from Bristol, like, no, I'm going to wait for, the opportunity. I'm at the top of the list. I can call the chief. He'll tell me if I have a shot in Fairfield before the list expires or not. And, nobody else is doing that. So I think that, we can try to position ourselves to do that part of it.
Well, and we also have to think about using resources beyond our community. Sergeant Harris from police talks about and uses it in his own talking of recruiting, what the strong relationship is between the citizens of Fairfield and the rest of the government with the police and fire and so we ought to think about how we incorporate other strong, because, having Brenda talk about it, or having our
Everybody
state reps
has to be
talk about
recruited.
it.
Everybody has to be a recruiter. You all have to be recruited. We all have to be recruited.
Right.
And we need other people in town government
Right.
and in the clergy, and the guidance counselors. We need to recruit and have force multipliers in this effort, because if it's one PI officer or recruiter, the job is just too big.
And Chief, we haven't talked about the legislative group that we met, in Hispanic, and that, I think, helped everybody else understand sort of the efforts that make work.
So how do we reach the community statewide? Because, we just can't go to every church and bodega to put up flyers and talk to people. And how do we get influencers to be on our side? And the influencers in particularly the Black and Hispanic communities are the churches. I've been to my share of Baptist churches in Norwalk. There are not a lot of 20 to 25-year-olds there for Sunday service, but there's a lot of moms and dads. And those moms and dads said, hey, the fire chief just came and they're running a test, and, what are you going to do with your life? What's your option? This may be something that you go and look at. One side of it, and we are is when mom calls and says, how do I apply for my son? And those are not and that's not coming from the diverse community. That's coming from, it's like, I desperately want to get my kid out of my house, and, I'm going to pay for all of it. The kid is absolutely not invested in the job at all. A waste of time. But I think that we need to get the influencers where they exist. And we have, to your point, reach out to the Black and Puerto Rican caucus of the General Assembly. We've had a first meeting with them. And reached out to the president of the state chapter of the NAACP. Again, we have to prove to them, we are the white suburban fire department. The banner could be the white suburban fire departments of Connecticut are running a consortium test. We have to prove to them, and I think that there has been, show us your true intent and follow through before we're going to jump in with both feet. That's clearly the impression that I want. Yes, we think that that's wonderful, but I'm not gonna take it at face value.
Right.
So I think that they have a vested interest.
No.
And they are capable of influencing the candidate pool that we're looking to attract.
And they indicated that they wanted to continue the conversation. They didn't dismiss it.
So a while back, we did a program here with the churches on safety.
Right.
A lot of stuff going on in the press. Can we maybe do a program like that again and get out to all the other churches that in the communities that we want to hit and get the church leaders here? Not necessarily, you know, all the moms and dads and the people, but get those church leaders here in the building and say, look, great opportunity, and we want to help.
Typically, there is a, association. I have found that it's better to go to them on their turf. Comfortable in that environment, different environment than some church. You know, but I think that it's part of the demonstrating our commitment to them, as opposed to dragging them from Stratford or Bridgeport or Norwalk.
Well,
But I think that
if I saw,
there is, the larger issue is, yeah, go to those, you know, pastors.
Right.
And they do get to, every denomination has a clergy association that get together on a regular basis, and I think certainly an opportunity to reach them.
and my thought is, if there is a group, yes, we could, you know, you could go, like you said, on their grounds and stuff, but instead of going out talking to this church, going out talking to that church, going out talking to that church, see if you can get that group to get a bunch of them together so that then you can speak to them. I'm the backup on call guy.
Got it. Yeah,
It's more respectful. Where you're coming from.
I absolutely think, going to them. And if it means going to several Baptist church
Yep.
programs, services on Sunday, that's what it takes. Don't have to go to every one of them. The deputy will, but I don't. I'll go with you.
Okay, thanks.
And you know what? Those services tend to be much longer, than even a Catholic mass. But, you know, my experience has been,
Music's better.
they don't, yes, they have drums.
Trumpets?
My experience is,
No.
you know, this is a different, you know, it's structured different than a Catholic mass, with the beginning, it is kind of free form for a while. Oh, and the fire chief's here. You want me to say a few words, we don't expect you to stay.
Right.
You're more than welcome to stay, but my advice is,
Don't stay.
take it or leave.
Right.
So, yeah, but I think going there, it speaks volumes.
Right. So the question is, where do we go from here? If does anybody have more questions or comments? I was trying to read. See, I didn't think so. I thought we were sort of. Alex was asked originally to do this as part of the town-wide effort and asked as an individual commissioner. What we've tried to do is partner together and hopefully get it to a point now or shortly where instead of a single report from one commissioner, in fact, we as the commission can endorse this effort, say that, you know, we're A, on board, and B, that there are strategies we think help. And we can't technically vote today because the agenda did not list a vote on it. And this is a special meeting, so we can't do anything about that. But I'd like to hear about, are you on board? Do you need more? Because one of the strategies possible, not be comfortable with it, I recognize that, is to at least let Alex be able to release a draft to key people to say that there's a general consensus and we'll bring it up next week at our full meeting where we can put it on the agenda for an actual vote. That's one strategy. I'm asking what you guys are.
My thoughts is, this is a good first meeting starting place. It can't end with
Oh, yeah.
tonight. We need to keep going. We've
Right.
talked about this since I've been on the commission, which is not as long as you.
Okay.
But, and I know it was a part of, and
The sense of,
when the chief was hired, it was part of this thing.
yeah, that's the criteria.
Way back, you know,
Right.
and
But I
8
think
years ago.
part of that is that the next piece of this is a very specific roadmap between now and March, which is the next test, and then a long-term, short-term strategy that with dates that lays out how it comes back and what's due, that we can then, that brings things back to the agenda. It brings us into the working. That you got the timeline. Right, but we have a very short term, how do we expand March? Then we have the longer term, which is about high schools and all of that kind of stuff, and maybe middle schools.
The advantage that we have is we don't have a lot of dates. Different environment than with police department. Verbal times that they can go out right, that they can assign within their normal workday to go out and use them. The deputy, and that we don't have the capacity to absorb some of that recruitment effort within the normal workday. And send them on a Sunday to an engine company. So there's, some of those organizational issues that put us at a disadvantage, which then comes back to money, and if we are serious about this,
And we
we
have
need
to
to
think through
need
what we
to
can do in
vote
the budget.
and have some consistent approach year over year that invest some time and energy to the recruitment.
Deputy.
Thank you. I thought
Yeah,
maybe,
and I think part of that is, what can we do within this year's budget?
Yep.
And then what do we need to put in?
Yep.
And where can we look for grant money that is not typical schools? Is there a grant in a foundation? Maybe not the government. Could buy the equipment, the regional school, all at once, all of it. But, so for the short-term question, I agree totally that this can't be one and done. It can't even be this week and next week and done. But how does that work? And do you think you're willing to consider voting on a draft of the report, which Alex can distribute to you by tomorrow, next week?
But we can consider voting on it, it doesn't matter which way it's gonna go.
No, of course. All this is a framework here for kind of.
I have a question that's gonna help me a little bit.
Sure.
Before we started doing the consortium.
Yep.
The town of Fairfield was running tests. Roughly, in your experience from the other towns and stuff, what would that test cost if we dropped the consortium and then went back to doing it?
It's that's not
$25,000.
By going to the consortium, we're saving 20 grand.
It hasn't appeared in our budget
Yeah, I
in a
know.
number of years.
I know. I know
We've been
that,
through
but,
this for the town.
you know,
Saving money and we
it,
never get
it
it back.
helps me justify things in my head,
Mhm.
sitting on this commission.
Yeah.
That if we're gonna, we used to spend that money to give tests anyway.
Mhm.
So maybe some of that funds, which is not in your budget now, can be reallocated for the marketing of the Fairfield Fire Department.
Mhm.
I certainly will be.
I think that if, I would have to check that, but was there an application fee?
Yes, but as I remember it, the line item cost was.
No, but the application fee is offsetting
It generated money.
the,
Yes.
just as it does now.
Yeah, but it never covered the whole
It
tax.
never covered the whole thing, and actually, I think, to correct it, it may have gone to the general fund and the expenses came out of us, just like all sorts of other.
Yeah, but I think you're right, make sure it goes to.
But that's one of, you know, I need, everything that we do,
Mhm.
when it comes to the budget, I need to be able to justify it in my head.
Right.
Sure. As a taxpayer and a taxpayer, you know, I need to justify it. You know, and that's a little justification there.
And $20,000 is a lot of money.
You know, yeah, oh, it is. You know, I just don't want to throw money at this
Right.
and not get any results.
No. It's gotta be, but I think we've demonstrated even with just the creation and sort of make it work. And it gives us the backbone build that we didn't have 4 years ago.
If we're splitting the cost there, we, of course, we're splitting the cost. I hear you, it's either we have to have our own list, and we're spending money just on us, or we're spending money on a region, happening anyway, and everybody's gonna share the cost of advertising. Then it's a little more equitable than just, like you said, us spending money, and then the market doesn't do with us. They're all the cost for it. I think that makes sense to me.
How far up does the consortium go? Town-wise?
Oh, Mansfield, Willimantic, Torrington.
Oh, wow.
We
It's
got,
not a
So,
no, I understand it, but what I'm thinking of is even coming out of the consortium side of things for marketing is maybe different, commercials on different local networks. You know?
Yeah.
So something is designed, you know, for the lower part of the county, something for, you know, up Hartford way,
Right.
for those towns, because, yeah, we want to draw for those people. But realistically, it's gonna be a close area where you're getting.
Well, and very typically, you would create, you know, let's call it a 3-second commercial.
Yep.
And first 15 or 18 seconds are generic to everybody.
Yep.
And then the last 10 or 12 seconds are
Would be-
specific to the
And
region.
that's exactly what I'm
And
thinking.
so it cuts the cost significantly to
Yep.
put that together.
And so what we have in here in terms of the recommendations that are here, these were, that's what they are, the recommendations for exploration. So how these then get turned into actual items is the next. The first thing is the recognition that there's an issue. We've done the research. Because a lot of other bodies are just kind of throwing it in the air. Oh, we've got a problem. Go through, done the research. We've established where the issues are, and it's clearly demonstrated both through data and statistics. This is not cherry picking data, but it's support of frequency and safety. And so we know there's a problem. We've identified some potential solutions. I think what you're talking about, you're right, is the mechanics before any money gets spent, because nothing in here calls for us to spend any money or to do anything here. Guys, you asked us to take a look at it. We did the homework. We did the research. We got the data. We recognized the problem. Here's the area for improvement. How do we go about and execute those recommendations and how we spend money? I think that's the next thing the commission needs to look at. That's kind of like step two. The first part is let the other folks know we've done the research you asked us to do. We've established the problem. We understand the areas we need to look at for recommended improvements. And then maybe, hey, for us to justify doing improvement, we have to move away from the consortium test. We want to go back to our own focused tailored recruiting. Or we keep the consortium, we do consortium level, you know, every shared cost for advertising is set split between lower up county. There's a whole bunch of ways to do it, but the first task that I was given, at least, going through the confirmation process before July was, you know, we commit to take a look at this for us, and that was something that I sent them to do. And so the goal here is to give you guys just a background paper. And again, there's nothing in here calling for us to spend any money. This is a draft, so it's subject to change. If there's input that our commission want to change between now and next week, I don't see any reason why we couldn't do that, and then redistribute a finalized draft with everybody's comments before next week. Almost chair.
Yeah, well, I'm fine with that. The thing that I would add that I don't is there and gets to Joe's point is that our next step is to develop a timeline, prioritization and timeline that takes us through the short term of data March and then begins to build the longer term.
Okay.
But that we're going to focus on the short term of how to expand the March Act process and lead to more success once we have candidates on the list.
So my lawyer, I just kind of envision this kind of present, you know, where we had to make this into something actionable. Is first, the first part is establishing the background, establishing the facts and the data, areas where we know we need. That's one. The second thing is to bring back to the commission is, okay, in order to make this actionable, here's the following action items in short term, medium term, long term. And this is just what the plan looks like. And then, okay, if we're going to do these things, what's the plan to actually get them done? And then how much is that going to cost? And how are we planning to execute it? So you're 100% right. We're out there creating all these programs, not advertising it to you. So we're spending our money to hire for other people's towns. It doesn't make sense. I think those are good planning parameters and guides and things we eventually need to get to. That's the step two. We're not there yet. And that's to your point. The reason it can't be done tonight is way too much work to get done.
You're right. Is there, an opportunity? What is their, how are they gonna digest it? Are they just going to get a document, or is there a dialogue?
So I touched base briefly with Selecta we left with, to let her know that, we're into the process of filter as well. I know the commission, or the task force rather, meet, on a regular basis. They've got their regular meetings. And so that was a good question. Do we go present to the task force with our findings? We just present a written copy to the co-chairs, let them determine. That might actually be a good opportunity. Talk about Nancy, see however she wants. Because I mean, I'm happy to do whatever the commission.
Well, the report is from the commission. However, I think that, it should be both the administration and the commission room.
Yeah,
great. Because I think that there's definitely questions that would be directed towards the commission, but also to the administration.
Sure. And so that was the other reason that they was mentioning, if everybody was good to release a draft copy to get feedback from the Racial Equity Justice Task Force, the first Michael Gonzalez, the HR director, because who knows if there's things you're not taking into account here that maybe kind of like just simply can't do it. And we don't want to present a finalized copy of this. Like the back or suggesting something that's good.
Then it's all the commission.
Right, and I didn't write that, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that good with everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I personally want to thank everybody. I think this is a robust discussion.
Yeah, we should have agendas with one item on it.
Yeah.
Everyone's one.
Those are the words that were.
It's usually about the commissioners going on and on.
I was ready to get here. None of this is in the meeting.
No,
But
but it's
that,
recorded.
but that, status stuff, we don't necessarily, so if we get the reports in advance, we can be much more aware. If there's questions on a report, they can get asked. But we don't take up the agenda time to review the report that you can distribute to us in advance, which is what we did with this. It lets us create a more robust agenda that we can specifically target, even in our regular meeting, like we're gonna do next week. So we'll have to change how we do that. So that there's a discussion time. Anything else? But I really do appreciate it. This was great. Yes, please.
So what you wanted, so the appropriate way to do this then is to email everybody that's on the commission, properly documented, and ask for feedback.
Yes.
So we're gonna meet, what's the date that's next?
Now, I would remind you, by the way, BCC, everybody, don't to them,
Thank you.
because that way they can never hit reply all.
Right.
If you don't trip FOI,
Yeah,
Right.
they can reply to you with their comments, but they can't accidentally trip FOI because nobody can hit reply all.
Check.
Well, I just, as long as you don't send to four, so I think when because four would make
Right.
four. But I think if we're gonna reply, we should reply back to you
Yes.
and then,
Yes.
so the two people.
Right.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Right,
not
and
just,
for-
not just, yeah, but if we
So you
reply,
can include me and the chiefs in the distribution at BCC, all the other commissioners.
Yes, ma'am.
Because that way you'll get to.
yeah, and we don't get stuck with,
Right,
oh geez, we have the illegal meeting.
right. No.
And especially with this topic,
Right.
because this can,
Right. We're trying
yeah.
to be very careful.
No, that makes total sense. That's what I wanted to ask. So I'm planning to send it out, in a Word version, so all of you can open it if everybody's fine with that. Just in a Word document.
Make sure to hit track
Not changes, no, I'm just taking notes.
so that way people can send it to you with changes right in the document. And you can be able to look at them and see them.
Check. So what's the special thing is next Thursday, correct?
Regular meeting.
Regular meeting next Thursday.
And we'll work on the agenda.
Monday's the holiday.
Right.
And so we have Tuesday and Wednesday.
Right.
And the Tuesday.
We didn't discuss it. We said we were gonna move it to this. We never said we were
What?
gonna have an operating meeting.
We know we have left the regular meeting. We raised the issue of merging them in. Is a regular meeting.
I'm just saying it's not in my calendar.
Okay, there is a regular meeting on Thursday that's published.
So the reason I was bringing that is that I'm gonna send this thing out and I'll send it immediately if all gets some internet connection.
Mhm.
Tomorrow's and Friday's a work day, but then we go into a 3-day holiday weekend, and we have Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday's the meeting. So what would be a reasonable date, do you think, to have some people's feedback by, so it can be validated, and then we can send it back out to everybody so you can see the changes?
Well, that would be up to you. I mean, because
mean-
you're the one that's gonna put it together. So when do you want our replies by?
Thing on Racewell for a minute?
Oh, I would say earlier than that, so you have some time. Just,
I don't know.
I work for a living.
right now,
Two jobs.
Love it. So if we could get it by, Sunday's a holiday, I'm happy to keep my Tuesday, Wednesday. I can spend Thursday, I'll block some time on my calendar. If we can get it by end of day Wednesday, then Thursday I'll assemble it and have it out before the meeting. for everyone to look at.
Perfect, sounds great.
anything else?
Okay, so before we adjourn, this could actually, we can adjourn, then I'll bring it up.
Is that legal?
I don't know, I just want to know, is everybody comfortable here? Can we have the meeting here this way?
Right.
Instead of online? So I don't know if that's, this meeting, it's not on the agenda, so we can't talk about it at the meeting, but I want to know if we could, if everybody was comfortable enough here tonight like this, because I think
Yeah, I prefer
it's.
this.
Yeah, so would I,
Yeah,
and that's what I'm asking, though,
we're
but,
back in this world.
Yeah, I would only ask to be able to, if you're traveling for business, if somebody can't be here,
Right.
but we can over there.
Yeah.
Because we have to do internet anyway.
That would be the only request. No problem.
Yeah.
Have to be our person.
yeah,
So I need a motion to adjourn,
someone.
second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, guys. See you next week. Have a great week, all.
I have